Everybody. Welcome to Creative Campfire. We hope that you are healthy and safe and somewhere where you are able to take a moment to be with us in mind, body, and spirit. If you joined us before last week for a celebration of our Youth Arts Month, thank you for being here. We received a lot of warm comments about our guests and the confidence and maturity of our young guests in particular. So thank you for joining us. My name is Amanda Whitworth. I am the current New Hampshire Artist Laureate, and I am a dancer and teaching artist and a professor at Plymouth State University. And I'm joined here by my co-host, Robin Marcotte.
Hi, everyone. Good to be here again. Hopefully some people are returning and we have some new people too, I hope. Thanks for having us all.
So if you recall, if you're someone who joined us before, we follow a format. And what that looks like is we have different sections of our webcast that go along with the theme of a campfire. We selected a campfire because for ages, fires have brought people together inside of communities, families, and also brought people from distant places together to connect. At a campfire, there are often stories shared, and those stories might be something that can be passed down, but they also can be conversations that might be difficult or sticky. So we thought a campfire would be the perfect metaphor for bringing our arts and culture sector together to talk about how we do and make creative work in light of the COVID pandemic. Tonight, our theme is epic failure. And this is wonderful because so much of what we see, particularly on social media, but also when we engage with creatives, we see the finished product of something that someone is making or performing. But there are actually many bumps and many challenges along the way. And some of those epic failures lead to essential pivots in the way that we think about our artistic work or our life. So tonight we have a great panel of guests from a variety of disciplines to both talk and perform on this theme. So I'd like to invite Jared Steer to unmute and pull up his video.
How you doing?
Yay. So Jared is a dad, a drummer, a mountain lover, and an educator. He lives close to me here in the Lakes region of New Hampshire, and he engages as a professional performer and also a teaching artist as music faculty at a variety of schools and organizations. He tours and performs as a guest, as an artist in residence, and he has a keen love for teaching his craft to others. He is here today to share his story of epic failure. And we are also going to show a bit of Jared performing. Due to some sound issues, I'm going to hopefully smoothly share my screen at that point, so bear with me. But first I'm gonna kick it over to Jared. Can you tell us your story of epic failure?
Yeah, I definitely have a few of them, but this one popped out from when I first started playing my first professional gig. It was a friend of mine had recommended me for a gig with this well-known jazz singer, and is at a place, well-known, it's a jazz series up at the Eastman Center. And what happened was, well, first I was an hour late to the gig, to the rehearsal, because I was confident in my navigating abilities and ended up showing up an hour late, and she wasn't too happy about that. So anyway, we got playing. She kind of gave me some harassment during the rehearsal, but we got playing, and then about 3 songs into the set, she looks back at me and says, "You know what? I'm going to give my drummer a call and get you some drum lessons." And, there's a big crowd there. It was a sold out show, and that definitely put me in my place, humbled me a little bit. Then she mentioned, "Birth by fire, baby, birth by fire." Just kept on saying that through the entire game. That definitely maybe get practicing. So it's definitely
Awesome. How old are you? Do you remember?
gosh, maybe 23, 24.
Interesting. And when after that experience, were you discouraged, or did that propel you to keep working?
It propelled me to keep working, but what I did, I was thinking about it on the way home, like what the heck was I doing so wrong? That prompted that comment, and I sent her an email, and it's like, what could I do better? You know what I mean? She said, play more brushes. So, right, thanks. So anyway, it's a good learning experience,
Great.
More than that. But.
Thank you. That's awesome. And we'll have some questions about that because now you work with students. And I do know that you help students persevere through some challenging material. So I'm going to do my best here to share my screen swiftly and give you a taste of what Jared was going to perform live, but it's sounding better using a pre-recorded audio. This track is called Kinka. It is an African drum set etude, and Jared has arranged it for cowbell in this rendition. Awesome. Thank you, Jared. If you want to know more about Jared and his work, you can check out his website, www.jaredsteer.com. He's also on Facebook, and I'll have a way for you to get all of this information post-show. So we are going to take it over to Sam St. Jean. If you could bring up your video and audio. Hello.
Hi.
Yay. Sam is a comedian, a podcaster. I love this one. A food enthusiast. Me too. And a New Englander. He is from Goffstown, New Hampshire, and has been living in New York City up until the COVID crisis, but he was actually out on the road in the national tour of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, where he was playing Augustus Gloop. Yes. He's also just debuted a new podcast with his lifelong friend. It is called Buzzed Broadway. You can find Sam on all the socials as @the Sam St. Jean. And
So dramatic.
yes. And
Of me.
Buzz Broadway, where do we find that?
Our first episode is actually going to premiere on streaming services this Friday. You can follow us on Instagram at Buzz Broadway Podcast.
Amazing. Great. Tell us about your epic fail story.
First of all, Amanda, thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy to be here. I'm going to try to make this story as short as possible. I think Amanda and Robin, our co-hosts, probably know that I can get a little long-winded sometimes. But this is a great story. So when I finished my college career in about 2015, I moved to New York City in January of 2016. And I believe in like universal messages. So I got this really crappy job working at a counter at like a burrito stand. I was crossing the middle of East 52nd Street. I still remember exactly where I was. And months prior, I had sent like a random email to a casting agent for a pretty well-known Broadway show. I'm not going to say which one, but a pretty well-known, just saying, you know, what do I have to lose? Nobody knows me yet. And I'm crossing East 52nd Street, looking at my phone like a dummy. And I have an email out of the blue from this casting agent saying, we want to see you film for this show. It was like movie moment. I stopped in my tracks. There were like cabs honking at me. So I got some friends together. They helped me film. I said, you know, this is so strange that you emailed me. I just moved to New York City. And they said, oh, if you live in New York, you should come in and do an appointment for us. So I went in, I practiced all the stuff. I had known it. But I practiced everything, and I do my appointment and I get good feedback. And then I get another email saying, we want to bring you in for a final callback for this role. It's a pretty big role in a pretty well-known show. And I was the most nervous I've ever been. I only told a few people. And then it's the day of the big audition. And I'm at this studio in New York City called Ripley Greer Studios. And I rented out a room for like 15 minutes before my audition so I could warm up and really just like calm myself down. And there was a Dirty Dancing open call. So a bunch of girls looking like Baby, right? Is that her name? Bunch of girls looking like Baby with the big hair. And I'm like pushing my way through, like I'm going to be late if I don't get through all these people. And I want to paint this picture for you. I have like my audition binder with like my like bad headshot that I used to have. And I have like a bottle of water and a big cup of like Starbucks tea. And the stairs at Ripley Greer are like suspended. There's like no spaces, but like there's spaces between them. There's no like back of the stairs. And I'm walking down and this really tall guy is in front of me and he like kind of misses his footing. It was right where there's a landing on the staircase. And I did that thing where you like think there's another step, but there isn't. So I get to the landing and I think there's another step and there isn't. And I lose my balance and like cartoon fall for about 5 seconds suspended in midair. And I know that I'm going to fall. I know that I'm about to eat. And I just go plummeting face first down this staircase. on one of the busiest days of the audition season. My tea flies out of my hand and spills all over the floor. My water bottle's like rolling down the hallway. Sheet music goes everywhere. It's like that scene in Devil Wears Prada where Emily Blunt gets hit by that car and all the scarves from Calvin Klein fly up in the air. That's what it was like. So I pick myself up and I get all my stuff together, and somebody was like, oh my God, like we need to call you an ambulance. And I was like, no, I'm fine. I think I laid face down for a while. So I think they thought that I like had passed out or something. But I get all my stuff together and I run to the audition and the monitor is not there. And I was like, oh no, like the audition monitor who's gonna let me into the room isn't there. And somebody comes around the corner and goes, oh, you're Sam, right? You're on the list. And I was like, yeah, I'm so sorry. I just fell down the stairs. And she goes, I just heard people talking about that in the coffee room. Like it had already traveled, the news of the fall had already traveled around the building so fast. So she's like, why don't you take a second and get yourself together? So I finally take a moment and like really figure out what happened. My hair had like all moved to the other side of my head somehow. My shirt is fully untucked and wrinkled. And I'm bleeding through my shirt and through the legs of my pants. So I go into the room looking like I just got mugged. But here's like where the failure, like, so I didn't get the job. That's like the real failure. But my favorite part about this story is that I walked into the room and I stood on my mark and there were like 15 people in there and the room was silent. And I looked at them all and every single person, all 15 of them, exploded with laughter. And that for me was like all I needed. It was like, I have them, it's a comedic role. It was a comedic show. I had them laughing before I even got in the room. So that's my failure story. I fell face first down a flight of stairs on the day of my biggest Broadway audition ever.
Bravo.
Thank you.
That is a winning
Thank you.
failure.
Feel big, right? That's what they say.
So great. So I knew this story a little bit before Sam came on, and I love this because there are, like Jared's story, it's like, oh, why would anybody ever call you out like that? That's so tragic. But then there's ones that are just so joyfully hilarious, right? So we're so glad to have Sam. So what are you going to perform for us?
I'm singing one of my all-time favorite songs with a little twist, a little bit of a surprise in the middle. So it's this is Somewhere Over the Rainbow from The Wizard of Oz with a little twist. When all the world is a hopeless jumble and the raindrops tumble on the ground, heaven opens a magic lane. When all the clouds darken up the skyway, there's a rainbow highway to be found. Leading from your window pane to a place beyond the sky, just a step beyond the rain. Somewhere over the rainbow, way up high, there's a land that I heard of once in a lullaby. Somewhere over the rainbow, skies are blue, and the dreams that you dare to dream really do come true. Someday I'll wish upon a star and wake up where the clouds are far behind me, where troubles melt like lemon drops away above the chimney tops. That's where you'll find me. When I think of home, I think of a place where there's love wish I was home. I wish I was back there with the things I've been knowing. Oh, if you're listening, God, please don't make it hard to know if we should believe the things that we see. Tell us, should we run away or should we try and stay? Or would it be better just to let things be? Living here in this brand new world might be a fantasy, but it taught me to love. So it's real, it's real, it's real to me. And I've learned that we must look inside our hearts to find a world so full of love, like yours, like mine, like home over the rainbow. Birds fly, birds fly over the rainbow. Why then, why can't I? If happy little bluebirds fly beyond the rainbow, why, oh, why can't
Bravo.
Thank you.
I wish we could all cheer for each other.
Yeah, that was wonderful.
I
Sarah.
hear it. I hear it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. We
I'll be
appreciate
back in a bit.
Yes. Awesome. Scott Plante, my friend Scott Plante. Let us see you and your audio. Hi.
What's happening?
I am so pleased to introduce all of you to Scott Plante. He is an artist, an athlete, a son and a friend, and most importantly, he is a giver. He is a singer-songwriter. And are you in Epping tonight?
Raymond, close.
You're Raymond. Okay. I was wondering where you were right now. Scott has his debut album available on all places where you can listen and purchase music, including Apple, iTunes, and Spotify. It is called Identity Crisis. And you can follow Scott on the socials, Scott Plante Music, and check him out on SoundCloud, Spotify, YouTube, all of the good things.
All the goodies.
All the good things. So Scott, I'm going to kick it off to you, changing the tone a bit about your story of resilience in the face of failure.
Okay. So I'm going to kind of give a broad spectrum of failure as it applies to my life. So I was kind of a closet singer all growing up, always sang in my room to all my favorite songs. But I had a counselor when I was like 22, 23 years old, kind of convinced me that I had a obligation because I was given a gift from God to be able to connect with people, and that thing was meant to be shared. So at that moment in time, I was extremely motivated to get out and finally start being a musician and join a band and create music. You know, I had this big idea in my brain that I was gonna, change the world, because I always wanted to make my lyrics painful enough to be able to connect to, but positive enough to encourage you to continue on. And I did. I moved to Tennessee and I sang for a band out there for about 4 years. I came back here. I was in a very hopeful rock band up in this area, but throughout my life, I had really struggled with addiction problems. And during that time, I had fallen into it really, really hard. I had basically gotten myself kicked out of this band that was supposed to, be really successful in this area. and my life kind of spiraled downhill, and that eventually led me to being sentenced to 3.5 to 7 years in state prison. My time in there was obviously extremely uncomfortable, as anybody can imagine. It's an extremely stressful environment. And towards the end, I made a commitment to myself that I was going to stay sober. And talking to you now, I have about 3.5 years of sobriety underneath my belt. And I had reacquired my passion for music. It's something that I felt like I was supposed to be doing my whole life. I felt like the universe was guiding me to do it. And I made a goal to set out to try to do it, you know, but unfortunately, being in that setting for as long as I was, it caused a lot of pretty severe mental and emotional damage. And what I didn't know at the time is it actually caused a lot of physical damage too. So I had acquired this white matter on my brainstem and my frontal cortex. And it's basically similar to somebody suffering from severe migraines, but the parts of my brain that are being restricted are the parts that are responsible for my vision. So when I got out, I was gung-ho. I was going to do this. I learned 3 hours worth of cover songs so I could start booking shows and come out to start playing shows. And I realized that not only did I have severe social anxiety, severely bad post-traumatic stress. So being in you know, environments with a lot of people made me feel really threatened and have a lot of fear and anxiety. You know, so I had to push through those things, and the issues with the white matter on my brain. Basically, when it gets set off, I have visual issues where my depth perception shifts in and out. Figures will distort or disorientate, which ends up causing to trigger the panic attacks. So I'm suffering from all these things as I'm trying to go out and perform, and it caused me to not be able to perform my best for a long time. But you know, the beautiful thing about it is I just kept going. I kept pushing through it, and because I wanted to be a musician that badly, you know, and over time and resilience, I was able to heal, you know, from those things, you know, as much as I can. There's still a lot of things I have to do in my everyday life to make sure that I'm okay, you know, but I found that balance. And now I get paid every weekend to go out to restaurants and play my cover song set lists. I created an album with the ex-bassist of the band Creed, which was a great thing for me. I'm currently working on my second album, and this one is actually going to be all very cinematic. The orchestra, all that good stuff is going to be in it. It's a very positive, inspiring album, and I'm pretty pumped to do it. But I'm going to play something off of the last album, and this song is called New Beginnings, and I think it's kind of suiting because everybody needs a new beginning, right? Everybody needs a chance to kind of start over, start fresh, so they can create something good out of what they have. How can someone so beautiful themselves so bad that they would settle for anything to feel her again? But I know you're just reaching for something outside your stars. Everything you've been looking for can be found in your heart, but you can't breathe again. 'Cause it's just not the end. And if you can't help, I'll embrace you until you can stay. Just to show you that you can stay. Stay.
to share personality because she's feeling scared. And now it's time to fall. Creation you want, standing just straight. Oh, yeah, take the light from your spark, but just bring it. 'Cause this is not the end, and you can carry yourself. I'll praise you until you can say, just to show that you can stay. And that's standing for everyone. That's part of that movie chapter. It opens the world for you begin. Yeah, this is not the end. This is just the beginning of the chapter of your life that is yet to be written. It's amazing when you take the time to look into your hand and realize you always been the one that's holding the pen. So let your imagination go wild, because this is your moment to write it out. The story is filled with emotion and understand that this is your life. So give it some meaning, because your heart is not covered by nation. Once you learn to love yourself, you can start up someone else, but give it all you got. Demand they love you in return, and you can tell yourself. I'll praise you until you can stay. Just to show you how you can stay. I'm steady for everyone. That's part of our chapter. It opens you up for new beginning.
Bravo. Thank you, Scott. We appreciate that.
Thank you, Scott. That was amazing.
Thank you.
Yay. So moving along, I am excited to have with us the director of the New Hampshire State Council on the Arts, Ginnie Lupi. There she is.
Hey, Ginny.
Hi. So I put Ginnie on the spot before, right when we were getting our sound checks, and I said, Ginnie, what are 5 words to describe yourself? So with no time to plan, Ginnie is a self-proclaimed optimist, cat slave to her one very cute cat, a geek, a connector, and an artist. And she is here joining us to give a quick information dump from the New Hampshire State Council on all things arts and culture. Take it away.
Thanks so much, and thank you all for your incredible performances and your stories. You are so inspiring, and you give me hope in this really challenging time. So this is a quick blast from the State Arts Council. Many of you know, hopefully, that we launched this morning our Artist Emergency Grant Program, thanks to the New England Foundation for the Arts and the National Endowment for the Arts. We have some funds to be able to distribute to individual artists whose livelihoods are being impacted by the pandemic. And so all of the information about that grant program is on our website at nh.gov/NHArts. So please check it out. We also will have some grants available for arts organizations And that information will be coming in the next couple of weeks, we hope. We have some funds from the National Endowment for the Arts that came from the CARES Act, and we will be distributing that money in the form of grants to nonprofit arts organizations. So that's happening as well. And just to let you all know that we are here for you. If you need something, if you have questions, if you just need to vent, if you want to talk to someone about your career, about the challenges that you're facing, Arts Council staff are here for you. This is our mission. It is our goal to help you in whatever way we can right now and after all of this is over. So please, please reach out. We are here for you, and we want to do whatever we can to help. So I'm going to hand that back to Amanda. Let's get on with it.
Thank you so much. We appreciate that. So I'm going to now introduce two friends and colleagues and frequent collaborators. If Catherine and Cathy could please reveal yourselves. Perfect. Awesome. So I'm first going to introduce Cathy Leblanc. Give us a wave, Cathy, so people know who you are. Awesome. Cathy is a self-proclaimed geek, cat mom, a bicyclist, a movie lover, and a computer scientist. She is a professor of digital media at Plymouth State University and also the general education coordinator there. She teaches a very popular class called Creating Games for undergraduates and is one of the most creative people I know, even though she doesn't identify as an artist. So she is here with us today. All of my guests, if you could kindly mute, I hear some feedback on participants. Okay, could be me too. All right, and then we have Catherine Stewart with us. Catherine is a playwright, a big thinker, yes, confirmed, we know that, a collaborator, a mover, and a knitter. She is the new artistic director of New Hampshire Theater Project, and she also works as a freelance playwright, director, and projection designer. She lives in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. So both of these women have been invited here today because they work in various ways with communities in order to persist through challenges and impasse and think about how to tell stories. I've asked them both to comment on their experiences and the kinds of tools or resources they have used or thought about in their lives and with their colleagues and students. So Cathy, why don't I kick it over to you first?
All right. So it's interesting that you mentioned creating games because that's sort of my model for the kinds of tools that I like to use both in my own life, but with my students. And given what I'm gonna say about the tools that I use, an interesting fun fact is I also am originally from Goffstown, New Hampshire. So yay, Sam. I didn't know that about Sam before. So for me, a lot of stuckness for students in creating games and for me in my own life comes from encountering obstacles and not being able to think about ways to overcome those obstacles using new perspectives. So what we talk a lot about in creating games is how can you look at the obstacles that are preventing you from achieving your goals, whether it's in playing a game or in creating a game or actually in life. How can you think about those obstacles in new ways? How can you attack them in new ways? So some of the tools that we use has to do with connections, which is why I think it's interesting that Sam's from Goffstown. That connection is really interesting. So what we'll do a set of exercises where we take ordinary things and try to think about the connections between those things. And that space of connection is the place where the creativity for coming up with new ways to overcome whatever the obstacle is might come from. When I'm thinking about those kinds of connections in my own life, I think about it in terms of teaching. A lot of times I'll find myself stuck with some teaching problem, and the way that my preferred way of solving those problems is to be in conversation with my colleagues who are brilliant people, and they always make me think about the problems that I'm encountering in new ways. And that slight shift of perspective is often enough for us to just get unstuck and continue to move forward.
Excellent. Yeah, so I've been lucky to work with Cathy on a variety of ideas and projects. And one of the things that is compelling about her work that might not be obvious when you think of her as a professor of digital media and communication is that humans are at the center of her work, and so is storytelling. And so for me as an artist, that is deeply impactful, and it also shows me the connection between what we consider an artist, like a singer, dancer, actor, and a creative worker. So someone who works in design, architecture, landscape, gaming, a variety of things. Both artists and creatives make up New Hampshire's creative economy, right? They are people who are innovating, and also many of us are entrepreneurs. And that's why I was very excited to have Cathy tonight, because she brings that perspective, right? And demonstrates that alignment and that connection between our work. So Catherine, I'm going to pass it over to you. Same question, responding thoughts.
Yeah, I've been thinking a lot about this since you asking me to kind of speak here, but it is a lot about perspective, like we've just heard Cathy speak about as well, and a shift of perspective. And I think that's what the creative process, whether we're doing that as a performative artist or a visual artist or a creative worker in another field, it's the skill of the creative process that allows us that gives us lots of tools for approaching the work that we have to do, the big problems or the everyday smaller things that we deal with. I've been thinking a lot about how success and failure, if we're here to talk about epic failures, right, like is the opposite of that success. I don't actually think they exist on like the opposite ends of a spectrum. I think they live like right next to one another. And that if we think about that, when we talk about, earlier you said, Amanda, about the essential pivot that we might need to take in a given moment where we sense failure, or we're feeling failure, or we're feeling discomfort, that pivot isn't often all that far if we think of it really close together. And that means that we don't often have to do too much to go from failure to success. And I try to think about that in my theatre making, or when I use theatre making to solve big problems, or to attack big problems, or to look at them or uncover big problems. And again, I'm a big strong believer, it doesn't matter whether you're using that creative process and you're a 6-year-old, or you're using that creative process as a professional artist, or if you're using that and you're actually a surgeon, but you're using a creative process, that we can do that kind of essential pivot if we really reframe what failure actually is, and the idea that failure is self-defined. We have to know what failure is for ourselves, and ourselves only. rather than it being some kind of edict from the rest of society or the world. If we understand what that is for us, we can make sure that what we're doing is values aligned and is that we get to own that failure and use it as another step along the creative process.
Yeah, that's really interesting that you say that. And before I make a comment, I want to invite Ginny and Scott and Sam and Jared to come back on to have this conversation with us. So one of the things that propelled this conversation and this webcast tonight was sort of the variety of failure stories across a very broad population. And as Catherine says, there's not a one size fits all failure. It's not like your failure is bigger and badder than mine or whatever it is, right? There are something that might seem inconsequential to me is huge to someone else. And we see that as stories come about. Some things when I was doing some research and listening to people here, I mean, there were stories about selecting coursework in higher ed, all the way to I shattered my pelvis and couldn't walk, and now I'm a dancer, right? It is really interesting. But those two stories, while very different, had an intense impact on that person. So I want to kick down to Jared, because Jared, you do a lot of work with students of actually a variety of ages. What's happening with your students? How do you work with them to persevere through challenging material? And in what ways are you maybe emphasizing the ability to take risks or to fail a little so you learn some more?
Before you answer that, Jared, sorry to interrupt. I just want to make sure that the rest of the participants and the attendees know that there's a question and answer box at the bottom of the screen, that if any of you guys have questions you'd like to ask any of the panelists or us, feel free to type it in there and I'll relay it over to any of the panelists too. Sorry to interrupt. Go ahead, Jerry.
Oh, no, that's fine. How you doing, Robin?
Good. How are you, Jerry?
Good. Robin and I went to junior high school and high school together.
Oh, yeah.
History there. So, yeah. Anyway, yeah, I was talking with actually a student about this morning because she didn't want to perform for me in her lesson. I had assigned her a certain assignment, and I said, would you like to perform this so we can, suss it out a little bit? And she said, no, I don't want to. It's like, why not? And she said, I'm embarrassed. I don't want to sound bad. And so it's like, for the first thing, there's a reason why you're in lessons and you're taking lessons is you're studying. You're gonna sound bad. That's why you're here. I'm your ears to help find the problem points, and then we can work on them. And then I relayed a little quote from a college professor, Don Williams. I don't know if you guys remember him. But one thing he said to me in college is, I'm going to paraphrase, you got to stink before you can get good. And I've always carried that with me. It's like when I'm working on something, it's like, yeah, it's going to not sound great. That's why you work on it to shape it, to sculpt it, I mean. And anyway, I always mention that to my students, like, you got to go through this stuff. These are growing pains you got to go through in order to get better. And then record yourself. Maybe a month from now, listen to what you're playing, and then listen to yourself now, and you'll notice at least some improvement, I would hope. That's if you're putting in the work, too. But yeah, so that's one way anyway.
Thank you. That's great. Other comments from our performers and panelists? Feel free to jump right in.
I'll hop on real quick. I am fully on the same page as Catherine in terms of talking about the fact that success and failure or epic failure don't exist linearly together. They have this like weird symbiotic relationship, and there are so many stories I'll speak from my point of view, there's so many stories in the theater community of things like that happening, and it's the phrase is such a cliche, but when one door closes, another really does open. When you think that something is a failure, it's usually something else in disguise that's allowing you to be on like the path that you're supposed to be following. There are so many other jobs that I didn't get before I booked the Charlie and the Chocolate Factory tour. And if I had those jobs, I wouldn't have been available for the audition or for the callback, or I would have been too tired. Like, to quote the great Jeff Goldblum, life finds a way. So I think it's exactly what Catherine was saying. They absolutely don't exist linearly. They have this like weird symbiotic relationship. And I feel like it's not until we push ourselves to accept any failure into our lives. I spent like 6 weeks in Robin's class with an exercise that focused on the fact that there's no one right way to do something. And it's until you push yourself to find any single solution to that thing, knowing that none of them will be a failure, that you find some sort of breakthrough.
Yeah, I think, in teaching, we forget how scary it is for people to be vulnerable enough to face that failure and then embrace it as a way of moving forward and or around it or past it, or like Sam said, it's so intertwined. It's hard to know how you're moving forward or around it or whatever, right? You're not always clear about what the path is going to be, but that fear of trying, I think, gets in the way for a lot of folks.
Yeah, and I think it's, and I see this particularly working with teens in organizations like Arts and Reach. It's not even the fear of trying, it's the fear of looking silly. It's the fear of judgment from other people. When we live in a world where social media gives people the ability to anonymously comment, critique, criticize an individual for doing something or saying something, we just shrink back from being brave and thinking big and putting ourselves out there. There's this really weird dichotomy of, I'm going to put myself out here on social media, but I have to mask it in something and not be my true self for fear of exposure or for fear of being made a fool of or someone disliking it. And I find what I've found in teaching is that is coming into the rehearsal room now, and particularly with young performers, that fear of failure or of putting yourself or an idea out there. And if we just keep all our ideas to ourselves, we're going to lose our ability to innovate.
So Scott, I want to ask you a question because you have an experience that none of us have had. Okay. To want to persevere, but not be able to because of the surroundings. And what I'm thinking about in particular is you started playing your guitar while you were incarcerated, and there was that one guard who was like not about it, right? Remember that? And this is like, to me, that's one of your most powerful memories and powerful breakthroughs. So I'm curious about when everything is holding you back, but you still, right, want to persevere, feel resilient. What do you do? How did you cope? What are you telling young people now?
It really just kind of boils down to a belief and a faith. You see the road that you felt in your heart that you were meant to travel, and no matter what kind of gets thrown at you, and I have a connection with something that I believe is greater than myself, and some people choose to call it God, some people choose to call it many different things, but I always kept a relationship with that thing and a connection and a belief that no matter where I was, as long as I was doing what I was supposed to do in my heart, that eventually I would find my way to wherever I needed to be, you know. And I think that that is the best way to persevere, is to just keep faith. You have to believe that what you're working towards is eventually going to come, because, you know, even with the whole idea of failure and success, like you guys are talking about, you know, I've learned from my little spiritual studies that I've really taken part a lot in throughout my life, that you know, something in this universe cannot coexist without its complete opposite. So it's a way to achieve balance in the universe. So I believe that the bigger the failure on the bottom, the higher on the other end that you will rise. It's just going to take time, because life is a flux and a flow, and sometimes you're going to have your downs and sometimes you're going to have your ups, you know. And the best way to deal with that is to not attach yourself to the lows. Understand that they are a crucial part of life and they're going to happen. Take what you can from them, learn some lessons, and use that to make small adjustments to make yourself better and get yourself to that higher part.
And I think like that's key too, because I think it's tricky, right? Like when you have this like a disastrous consequence from something that you did or you made happen, it's hard to have the clarity of mind in order to even shift those things. So one of the things I know Scott's saying, and I know Cathy works on creating habits of mind with students, are like these tools, right? So you used your spirituality and you use little tricks and tactics to shift your thinking. So maybe that, like, what are you all, when you get to these walls, what are exactly those little things? What are those little pivots you practice?
For me personally, I have to, if an idea isn't working, I'm extremely stubborn, and I will continue to repeat it even though it'll generate and create the same mistake. So I have to kind of let go of my own personal ego, and I have to be open. I have to be open to what that answer might be, because I think sometimes life doesn't always turn out exactly the way that you envisioned it in your mind, but it always turns out exactly the way that it should be. So I think you just have to stay open to whatever that answer is to get you past that wall, to get you to move on to the next phase of your life.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I actually, you know, sort of started my professional career as a software developer, software designer. And I think anybody who programs for a living encounters this kind of stuff all the time, where you're cruising along and bam, you hit something and you just can't figure it out. And when I would teach students how to program, sometimes it was our best students who struggled with those moments the most, because they hadn't developed any skills for how to get around those obstacles, because they had never really encountered them before. For me, what I would always have to do is walk away and go think about and do something else, because that helps to do what Scott's talking about, which is just free your mind from the way you think it ought to be, to just being able to look for connections to other things so that you might be able to move past whatever the issue is. And I will say, computers are, you know, harsh judges. It either works or it doesn't, right? Lots of ways to get there, but it either works or it doesn't.
I love that, Cathy. Tool that I use to do exactly what you said, to kind of take some time away, for me, it boils down to comedy. I think I'm the kind of person where like anything is fair game when it comes to a joke. For me, I would take a deep breath and think about it if I wanted to try to lighten somebody else's mood with a joke. But for me, I had this phrase that entered my life last summer, talking about having like existential crisis, and it said the phrase was just embrace the absurdity. I was like freaking out about my existence and my purpose in the world, and like, how am I this little speck of dust on this weird rock in the middle of this void of space. How do I fit into everything? And I read this article that just said you have to embrace the absurdity of the situation. And taking that giant thought about this existential crisis I was having has now worked itself into so many real life applicable situations that I've found is what's the most absurd reason that this could be happening? And it gives me that break. It gives me that time away. It like loosens my death grip on the fact that I'm afraid of failing and says, okay, like it's really not that serious. I play pretend for a living. It's really not that serious.
And I really, I use this phrase all the time that comes from the choreographer Liz Lerman, that is to turn discomfort into inquiry. So when you feel a tension point or a moment of, oh, I don't like this, or this, like whatever that is inside you, resistance, when you feel resistance to something, which happens, I think, at the most, like right in the middle of that failure, you've just done a really dumb thing, and you just, for me, I just feel like I just want to turn myself inside out. But if you can take a breath and ask yourself a question to pull yourself out of that hole, you know, thinking about what that question is can then be the thing that takes you in a whole brand new direction. What is that discomfort, and can I turn that into, actually, it's not discomfort, it's the next step on the path.
Thank you. So unfortunately, we like get to the meat of a discussion and I have to clip it off and manage the time. But I want to say thank you for sharing your stories and insight on discomfort, right? I think we can call epic failure many things, right? And I do appreciate having you all here. I have a website, and at that website, leadwitharts.com, on the blog section, I have bragged about all of these people and linked everything possible that I could dig up about them in the blog. So if you are interested in the work of all of the guests today, please visit the blog here and you can connect to them, their albums, their music, their teaching, their syllabi, their schedule, their personal email. You can get there because I got the dish. So please visit us there. You can also connect with the New Hampshire State Council through the arts, on the arts there. And I am so thankful to all of you for joining us tonight. We have one more Creative Campfire. This is a series of 3 webcasts. The next one happens next week on Tuesday, May 5th, same time, same place. The theme is Word Dance. We are smashing poets and dancers together for a live performance, including the New Hampshire Poet Laureate and some of my favorite poets from around the state and my dance tribe, well, a few of my dance tribe. I can't wait to show all of them off. And again, thanks to all the guests. You'll be hearing from me soon. Thanks all. Have a great night and we'll see you next time.